Hi, this is Sam Botstein from MachineSkills.com. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube for all our machine tutorials. In today's tutorial, I'm going to talk about some ways to use and get the most out of audio from an external hardware synthesizer within Maschine. In a previous tutorial, I talked about how to use the physical MIDI connections on the Maschine Studio hardware or the machine controller to sync an external piece of hardware to Machine's clock. I'll post a link in the description for this video and on the blog post on MachineSkills.com. Here I've recorded a riff from my modular synthesizer, and I've changed up the way that it sounds every 2 bars. For best results slicing within Maschine, I recommend recording an even power of 2 number of bars. Here I've recorded 32 bars, but it would work just as well to record 4, 8, 16, 64, and so on. This way, Maschine will automatically detect the BPM very easily, as well as the number of bars based on that BPM. So here's decided that it's 70, which is fine, but I could easily turn this 4th encoder on the Maschine hardware to jack it up to 140. And of course, when I do that, the number of bars shifts to accommodate that. So at 70, it was 32, and at 140, it would be 64 bars. Here I have it set to 16 slices so that it'll map evenly across the pads of some group, but I could easily get 32 slices to have even 1 bar loops, or jack it down to 8 or even 4 slices for much longer samples. Here I'm going to leave it at 16 because the way that I recorded it, I changed the way that it sounded every 2 bars. So let's hear that now. I have the polyphony set to 1 so that when I press one pad, it'll cut off the sound from another. But you can easily stop the audio of any long sample just by pressing Shift Mute to choke all the samples. It's very, very helpful. So here at the beginning, it's a very percussive kind of sound. And later, it gets more resonant and more full-bodied. So here I have a lot of nice 2-bar loops, and if I just apply this to a group, we'll get this whole arrangement over 32 full bars in Maschine. Before I do that though, let's say that this was recorded at 70 BPM, but you wanted it to be at some other tempo. You can very, very easily time stretch it to be the appropriate tempo. And the way I recommend doing that is to set the master tempo to wherever you would like your track to be. Let's just call it 80. And then if you are to go into the edit pane and then choose stretch, it'll automatically detect that new BPM. All you would have to do is click apply and it would warp to this new tempo. But I'm going to leave it at 70 just the way that it was. So now I'm going to apply these slices to a group. Essentially, it's evenly mapped across the pads so that each 2-bar phrase is its own pad. So this isn't really any different than the sample that we got originally, but now we can easily make a new pattern and simply put one of the sounds on it. So if we were to put the first sample on a 2-bar pattern, we would get a nice even loop. And likewise, if we were to make a new scene and new pattern, and put another one of the samples on that pattern, so this is a super useful and quick way to get arranging quickly from that big, difficult to use riff that I had recorded originally into Maschine. I really like to get the most out of my samples, so I'm going to go back to that first phrase, which was very percussive, and reuse it as some percussive sounds within this track. So if I select that pad and go into sampling, we'll see that the entire sample is still there. If we just hop into the edit mode it'll automatically know what we want to do, and all we have to do is press apply, and we just get that one phrase. So I want to preserve this pad the way that it is, so that first scene stays the same, and we can reuse this whole phrase and all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this pad to another pad on some group. So here we have it again here on group C. And if I go back into sampling, I can do a couple of things. I could split it up the same way that we did before, into even quarter note slices or some smaller division. Or I could actually isolate the individual transients by using the detect mode. Now, I can tell from my machine controller that this is many more than 16 individual transients. So I wouldn't be able to use every single one on the machine's pads. So what I'll do instead is I'm going to duplicate this again. So this way I can cut it down to a 1-bar sample on the first pad and another 1-bar sample, the second of the 2 bars, on the second pad. So here I'm going to go into sampling, and I am going to go into edit, and I'm going to cut it down to just be 1 bar. So I'm going to find the end of the first bar right here, and zoom in and cut it up real close so that the rhythm is right. And now I should have a simple 1-bar loop. And what I'll do is I'll slice it once again using the detect mode. And I've picked the sensitivity all the way up. And here we're actually getting each individual transient. And what I'll do is I'll apply these to yet another group. Let's say group D. And then go back and repeat the process and apply them to group E. So I'm going to select the second pad. And do the reverse of the edit we did before. And once again, in detect mode, with the sensitivity all the way up, I should get each individual transient. And I can apply it to group E. So if I mute everything besides the group that we were using for the riff and this sliced up percussion sounds, we can already hear some interesting internal rhythms happen. Hearing them layered like that, we have a lot of really nice low end and some really nice percussion sounds. But let's just say that what we want to do instead is establish a nice 4 by the floor beat. All we'd have to do is layer up a couple of these samples. And we should be able to hear that pretty clearly. So we're starting to have the beginnings of a track all from that one original sample. We haven't used anything from Machine's library. We are only using that external hardware synthesizer. Now, from what I'm hearing, this would be a good time to make use of some of Machine's internal effects to really take the sample to the next level. For one thing, it's a little hard to hear at times because the nature of the modular synthesizer, it can sometimes be very soft and sometimes be very loud. So by using Machine's mixer, but also using some effects like some compression, we can actually make the sound much more cohesive really quickly. So if we were to drop a compressor onto here, bring down the threshold to pretty low, and to even raise up the gain a little bit, this will really make things sound a lot more cohesive really quickly. And we're hearing some of the filter resonance that was all but lost in the way that it was sampled. So a compressor on the synths is very typically a good idea, maybe not as extreme as I have done here, but it might also be useful to try the feedback mode. This is a really easy way to introduce some grit and some feedback that may or may not have been present in the original sample or across all the different slices that we've made. On the percussion group that we had, we could also use some compression. But this would be a good opportunity to use Maschine's built-in reverb. You know, if we're using a full analog synthesizer, we may or may not have had access to you know, digital effects like reverbs. So altogether, this is already starting to sound like a much more interesting kind of techno feel than the original sampled riff. Another good choice for both the riff track and for the reverb would be some EQ. So, you know, if we are really having trouble hearing that bass in the mix, it would be a good idea to bump up the low end a little bit, or alternatively, if it's overpowering the drums, we could actually bring down the low end and consider using the sidechain input of the compressor. So pretty quickly, using slicing and Maschine and recording just a certain way, it's very easy to start arranging audio from analog or just external hardware synthesizers within Maschine. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube for all our Maschine tutorials, and check us out at machineskills.com.